This is Merchandise Mart. Transfer to Brown Line trains at Merchandise Mart. Doors closing.
Welcome everybody to the Wisendale Weekly Wrap-Up, where we talk about architecture, design, everything in between. Today I have a very special guest with me. Go ahead, you can introduce yourself.
Hey, thanks, Felix. My name is Michael Darling, and my new identity is co-founder and chief growth officer of the Museum Exchange.
Nice. And how long have you been doing that?
1 month.
1 month?
Yep.
Nice.
So 1 month yesterday. So yeah, it's very, very new.
Very cool. Congrats, man. Let's start all the way back. First of all, how long do you think this is for?
Good question. We can test it out.
Let's test this out here. What do you think, an hour maybe? That looks pretty heavy though.
Yeah.
So take us back into where are you from? Like, how did you start in your career?
Yeah. I grew up in Southern California, and I think back in, pretty early on got excited about art. I feel like I can kind of trace it back to middle school and opening up a book in an art class and seeing like Picasso and Kandinsky and thinking like, oh my gosh, what is this stuff? I want to know more about this. And but it really wasn't until I went to college, and I went to Stanford in Northern California that I kind of was recognizing that I was doing really well in my art history classes and not as well in my econ classes.
Yeah.
And I thought, hey, this is something that I really like, and I'd like to pursue this. So I kind of little by little, I did some internships at museums and figured out I needed some graduate degrees in order to really make a run at this career. And so did a master's and a PhD at the University of California, Santa Barbara.
Okay.
Which actually, at that time, I was still, I'll always have been interested in architecture and design too. So my actual PhD was in architectural history.
Oh, nice.
But I did a kind of a weird path through that and was really funny that we're in a space like this. Was my dissertation was about George Nelson and
nice.
his furniture designs, and especially how he was thinking about domestic interiors in particular at mid-century. And at that time, the whole mid-century thing, this was, mid-90s, it was just starting to kind of happen. And I kind of got into it because I was going to garage sales, and like finding Eames stuff and Nelson stuff. And I was like, I need to know more about this. And there was no good resources really, except for that really big, beautiful Eames book by the Newharts. And so I kind of got into it that way, but always was interested in contemporary art and was writing criticism for local newspapers and weekly newspapers and magazines and stuff. And so little by little just sort of got my foot in the door. First at the Museum of Contemporary Art, Los Angeles. That's really where I got my foot in the door and where I've had my first really paid curatorial museum job. Although I did work as a museum guard when I was up in Santa Barbara as a grad student. And so I've just been around museums now, I guess, for 30 years or something like that.
It's quite a path for
Yeah.
sure. And just really quick, big shout out to Hayworth and company here hosting us today. Stay tuned after the podcast. We're going to be sitting down with Lauren, and she's going to be talking a little bit more about what you see and the products that you see and seen here if you are watching visually. So yeah, the museum life. I mean, that's and obviously you still stay connected to galleries as well, right? And the smaller or larger as well. Yeah,
I mean, galleries are just so important in the ecosystem to kind of bring artists forward and bring them to the public attention. And then, often then museums, will step in and kind of take it from there, doing exhibitions and things. But I've always had a bit of a underdog streak, and I'm always like looking at the artists that are not the ones that everybody else is talking about, or not the ones that the marketplace is really excited about, and just always wanting to kind of look around the corners and the edges, and also just thinking too about like there's so many artists that art history kind of misses. And so I've always been really excited about how to push some of those artists that maybe have been forgotten or overlooked in some way and push them back into the spotlight. So that's, I'd say that would be something that would be kind of a hallmark of my career, my interests in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and just sticking on the museums, I mean, obviously there's different museums of contemporary art, right? And how do How does one compare to the other? Is it the amount of the collection, the square footage? Because typically, what are the gauge or the benchmarking?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question, and because I've also tried to kind of poke at all the different models kind of throughout my career. Like, I first, like I said, started at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Los Angeles, which is, their mission is contemporary art, and they collect contemporary art, and so I got that kind of education working there. But then I wanted to sort of see what it would be like to program contemporary art in a more general museum. So after 8 years at MoCA Los Angeles, went to the Seattle Art Museum. And so programming contemporary art in that setting is different. It's the mission for the museum is not contemporary. It's like all kinds of art from, especially there, different parts of the world, different periods. And so how to kind of bring a contemporary point of view into that setting is really interesting, I think. But at the same time, then when I finally got to the MCA in Chicago, it was nice to be back at a place where, again, the mission was all contemporary all the time, and just that's what you're cranking out. But the other difference, I think, is whether or not a museum has a collection or not. And museums with collections obviously have a resource that they can always draw upon to make exhibitions with and things like that. But it also really helps to form that museum's identity and what they are and what they're about and even what their reputation is. And then kind of it gives you a starting point to kind of use that collection and then build upon it in some way. But on the other hand, museums, and especially contemporary museums that don't have a collection, they have another kind of freedom. It's just about making exhibitions. It's not about taking care of a collection. On the one hand, they don't have those guideposts that a collection could give you, but they have to find other ways to kind of define what their mission or their strategy might be. And I think I have not worked at one of those kinds of museums, but I think that there can be a certain freedom there. And a lightness of activity that you don't have when you're also trying to think about your collection and looking after that at the same time.
Yeah, of course. And obviously people change. And how is it a board of trustees? And again, these are all questions because I don't know. So I'm always curious, like how, because it passes through hands, right? And how do you, obviously there's an interview process to the curator and to the selections, but how is that, who's making those selections, and how do you be sure that they translate from person to person? Yeah.
I mean, in a best case scenario, the day-to-day staff of a museum is really determining the direction of the museum, and the board is just there to kind of support that vision and those efforts. And of course, if the museum is going off course in some way, financially or ethically or something, that's when the board really needs to step in and provide some leadership. But I think if they can kind of keep a little bit of an arm's length distance and trust the professionalism of the director, of the curators, of the other staff, I think that's the most ideal situation. And luckily, I've worked in museums where it's been like that, where there's more of a hands-off approach and of the relationship between the board and the staff. But there are other museums where the board can be meddlesome and get in the way and influence programs, or be also maybe lax in their financial oversight. Or strategic oversight in how they build their board and what their relationship is to the rest of their community. So there are situations where that hasn't gone as well. I think the main thing now that I feel like is a really pressing issue in museums is the relationship between the board and the staff, and boards that typically provide so much financial support to those museums and keep them running.
Which then adds to the collection, right? Or the ability to gain a collection, is that correct?
It can, it can for sure. But museums, so many museums these days are not supported by the government, whether it's federal or state or local. And so many of them are dependent on private money to make them run. And that conflict between where that money is coming from, what the ideals of the museum and especially its staff are, I think is one of the biggest rubs in the museum industry right now. And you've seen that in some high profile situations like at MoMA and like at the Whitney, and where the values of of those financial backers are maybe
Different.
in conflict
Yeah.
with the values of the people that are working there
Yeah.
and the artists. I mean, the thing about contemporary art museums is that you're dealing with living artists. And so you have to take their concerns into consideration as opposed to, this sounds kind of crass, but dead artists, and working with historical material, it's a different relationship and a different kind of responsibility, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean that's a lot. It's a difficult situation, I think, all around. So, I guess leading up, to the museum exchange. So tell us a little bit more about that company.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd been at the MCA for over 10 years and was starting to really think like, okay, it's a good time. I've done a lot here. Really proud of the things that I've done, but kind of was needing a new challenge in a way. Yeah. And also, like what I was just saying a minute ago, this is a really different time in the museum world. I think it's a time when new leadership really needs to step forward. These new really pressing social concerns are at the forefront of everyone's mind. And I thought it would be also great just to sort of step aside and let someone else come in and really tackle those things with fresh eyes, because to be honest, like being at a place too long or for a long time, you start to get a little comfortable.
Absolutely.
and you can't maybe see everything freshly, and you bring somebody new in and they can kind of crack some eggs and kind of make stuff happen.
Yeah.
And that's what's expected of them. So I really thought that could be a great opportunity for the MCA in that way.
Yes.
But I still love museums. Like I mentioned early on, I've just been involved with museums for 30 years now, and wanted to stay involved in that way and find another way to help museums. And so when this opportunity came up in this company called Museum Exchange, it seemed like a perfect thing for me to shift to. I mean, risky and kind of wild because it's a brand new company, and there's only 5 people, and it's literally a startup. And but it just felt like the right time, especially after 2020, and kind of reckoning with everything that we've done and what we've been through and where we're going, and it just felt like the time to really kind of throw caution to the wind and try something different. But the basic idea is that it's a platform that exists in between art collectors on one side and museums on the other, and we try to bring them together in the middle, where art collectors that want to donate work, they put them onto this platform, and then on the other side, museums are signing up, and every quarter they're looking at a brand new catalog of works that are available for donation. And it doesn't matter if it's a big museum, a small museum, a university museum in the middle of the country on one of the coasts, big city, small city, like essentially everybody has the same chance at getting those artworks. They basically just write a proposal to the donor of that work, and at the end of the viewing period, those donors will look at those proposals and see which one makes the most compelling case. So we've just finished our first cycle, having a catalog up online, and we had 50 museums already looking at that catalog.
Great.
And we've got like 40 proposals that came in during that period, and so we're giving those proposals now to those donors to decide. And in many cases, there's multiple proposals, and the donors are going to have to kind of choose. And amazing scholarship and art history kind of coming out of these proposals. And so
the proposal from the museum, or from the museum, is telling the donor what they will do with the So they're basically just writing out the pathway of what they're going to do.
Exactly. A little bit maybe about what their museum stands for and why this object would make a difference in what they're doing. Because one of the things that donors don't like is that their object goes to a museum and sits in storage. So the fact that a museum can say, this is important to us and will change what we're doing in XYZ way, is powerful.
Yeah. And I think leveling the playing field, it sounds like that's really what that platform allows or gives the availability to. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the really exciting potentials of this, and to be talking to small museums across the country and understanding what they're looking for. And then that informs my conversations with the collectors. I've got a place that'll be perfect for this work that they're looking for, this kind of thing. And so kind of being essentially kind of being a matchmaker in a way, which is a role that I've enjoyed playing when I've been at museums, like connecting collectors, their trustees with artworks and things like that has been always a really fun thing to do. So so it's been great, and I think we're all, like, yesterday was the end of our first cycle, and we all kind of got together and talked about how it went, and I think we're all feeling really positive with that first round and testing the business model in a way.
Yeah, congratulations. So every quarter then you guys are aiming for?
Yep. Yeah. So a brand new catalog is going live essentially today, and it'll be up for 3 months. And so the next push really for me will be kind of gathering objects for the catalog after that, and getting more and more museums signed on and looking at this current catalog and getting them involved. And so kind of trying to grow both sides of it kind of in tandem, so that one side isn't bigger than the other side in terms of the supply and the demand. But yeah, and we've really envisioned all kinds of, as we're going through this, all kinds of other ways that we can grow the company in different directions too. So that's been really exciting.
Nice. Yeah, and it sounds like you're curating still within the platform.
Kind of,
itself, right?
As things come in, you start. I mean, I think it was William Gibson wrote a book called Pattern Recognition, and I really love that concept of pattern recognition. I think it's actually very key to what a curator does, where you see this one thing and then this other thing next to it, and then a third thing, and like, oh, what is the connection between those? And then all of a sudden a story emerges. And so that happened as we were building this current catalog, where we started to see themes emerge, and then and then you kind of put a little narrative around it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure as the catalogs start being released, you're going to definitely find more information in the data.
Yeah.
That's exciting. I want to stay on it, but I just want to ask you about this. What are your thoughts on the NFT type of movement that's going on right now? I feel like I just have to, because I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I also agree that it's really interesting. I think there's absolute legitimacy to digital art. Yeah, and how to own digital art and display it and kind of take pleasure in it. Yeah. I think is super worthwhile. I'm still kind of coming to terms with some of the prices and the valuation, because so much of the traditional art market is based on kind of, a pretty recognizable sort of, what would it be called, like a pathway from like a lower valuation to a middle valuation, and that's usually tied to like exhibitions and reviews and museum shows, and as a career kind of progresses, you start to see prices kind of going up. And in this case, to see these like incredible spikes, up to $69 million. Yeah. And, I'm trying to make sense of that part and see kind of where the kind of baseline is there to make sense of all that. Yeah. The thing I love about it, from what I understand, is that artists that make these digital objects, or digital artworks, I should say, seem like they're getting money every time they change hands, and that's kind of built into the system, and that doesn't exist in the traditional art market right now. When an artist has a piece that goes to auction and sells for tons of money, they already sold that piece probably a long time ago at a very low value, and they get zero financial benefit from that. Wild. So that is something that's I think that the traditional art market should really be looking at. Yeah. And I think in many ways the pressures on the auction houses could distribute that money back to those living artists if they wanted to. Yeah. But they haven't really chosen to. So I think that's a place where maybe artists could rise up and kind of exert a little more pressure in some way. There's laws that get in the way, but that don't compel the auction houses to do that. But I think it's kind of wrong. I mean, you see it in like the music industry where you have rights to your songs and you get royalties and all of that, and visual artists by and large do not have those same rights.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know, recently the NFT that Michael just alluded to as well was called Beeple.
Well, the artist is called Beeple.
The artist is called Beeple, yeah. And the title was...
I think it was called 5,000 Days.
5,000 Days, yeah. Right? Where he took photo for 5,000 days, didn't miss a day, and then the auction house of Christie's,
yeah.
Purchased it and sold it for the 69 million amount. So it's ridiculous. I think one of the interesting things that I heard about that too, or the NFTs, is that the artists are now using the market as part of the medium. So they can, whoever purchases the NFT, then they get the royalties as well, and you know, they can either make it into a JPEG make it into a JPEG, print it, do whatever they want with that art, which I think was super interesting too.
Yeah.
Right. That opens up a lot of opportunities to what to do with it.
Yeah, it's true. Right? Yeah, I mean, the person that bought that Beeple piece, you know, it could be interesting if you could put it on like a gigantic kind of screen or something, where you can really kind of look at all the different images in there, and I mean, I suppose you could do that on your own home computer screen, but I mean, that one of the cool things about museums is sharing those things with people.
Yeah.
Which again, you know, happens online, I suppose, virtually, but kind of it's just like the movies, like seeing things with other people in the room and kind of getting the energy from their reaction and all of that is part of that that kind of human interaction that I think is quite important, you know.
Yeah, and how we met through the MCA, and I think one of the things that really stood out to me with one of those meetings was when we were talking about an emerge artist. I believe it was a Native American, where it looked as just like an abstract piece of artwork, and you're like, typically what happen or the type of artwork is where there are maps, where that type of artwork has maps. And I thought to myself, I'm like, wow, Michael really has to know a wide range of type of art, right? And how do you kind of stay on top of the almost the technique, or not really the technique, but like the style of art? How do you stay abreast of that? I know we talked about coffee table books and how you love coffee table books and books in general, but how do you stay abreast of all of that?
Yeah, you know, I think that's one of the things that has become really challenging for contemporary art curators, is almost an expectation that you know everything about that's going on everywhere in the world. And it created a bit of an arms race amongst curators to like just travel all the time to every corner of the world and go to art fairs in every country in the world and like know something. And you know, there's a point where you just can't. And maybe you get stretched so thin that you're only looking at a certain kind of the most visible art and not digging deeper into a certain community or geography or something like that. And so finding that balance between, you know, really having some kind of deep knowledge about a particular kind of art and also having some breadth, you know, is a tricky balance. And I suppose one thing at the MCA, we had the luxury of having about, you know, 5 full-time curators on the team. And I kind of helped to build that team in a way that there was a portfolio of different types of expertise, you know. So one person that really knows Latin America and would go down there and look at that work and bring that to the fore, and looking at Asian work or African work and the Middle East and South Asia. And so if you've got the luxury of multiple people that can fan out across the world and bring that information back, oftentimes, you know, reading about it and learning about it in different languages than English too. I mean, that to me is like really ideal and a fantastic. But if you're the only contemporary curator and you're expected to know what's going on in China and Beirut and Buenos Aires, you know, not to mention New York and LA and Chicago, you know, it's kind of impossible. And, you know, all day you'd just be like online, you know, looking at galleries and reading art magazines just to like stay up with it. So it's tricky. It's tricky to do that.
Do you think the COVID pause was good for curators, or what do you think? How do you think, not only yourself, but just in general, what was the kind of strategy or the pivot for typical curators or finding out that information?
Yeah, I think it's probably because nobody was traveling.
Right.
I think that pause allows a lot of the art world to recognize probably the carbon footprint of all this traveling and these art fairs and things going on all over the place. And to really kind of push people towards those digital resources that you can access from home. I mean, the thing that you miss that I always thought was so valuable was, well, of course, seeing exhibitions in person because of the reasons we mentioned. Like, so much art is physical, and it's your physical reaction to it and how it shapes space. You know, if we're getting back to architecture, is is really important. But then also seeing artists in their studios and how they're working, and just seeing what's pinned up on their walls can be so illuminating sometimes. And seeing the unfinished product, seeing that experimentation and those failures that happen before the stuff leaves the studio and goes up on a museum or gallery wall. I mean, all that information is really important. And
important.
I always felt like all my inspirations really came from being in artist studios and hearing what they're concerned with and talking about, and then having that information shape kind of whatever the point of view that I was, because then you're getting like it's sort of like a stock trade or something. You're getting the information that's shaping, the current field, and bringing that to the public. So that was one of the things that was always so exciting about.
I mean,
travel.
The space, and sticking with the architecture and design, the space of. You really get to understand who the person is, right? When we were talking before about office space, and it's nice to bring someone in and they can see those kind of those ancillary things that really provide a lot of character to who an individual or who a group of individuals really are.
Yeah.
Even to the art on the wall. How do I guess, like, art consultants for workplace or for commercial spaces, right? Like, that's nothing new. People typically have, art consultants curate the art shown on the walls in workplaces. Is that still a big kind of industry, or did you come across that a lot? It is definitely a really big industry, and I would say that it's really become quite big in the last 10 years or so, as collecting has really ramped up, just the consumption of art, which also has gone hand in hand with these art fairs, and people that don't, they're busy in their normal lives and don't have the time to go chase artworks, and it's become quite competitive to chase those artworks. Yeah. And so art consultants have really served an important purpose in kind of keeping that art moving and flowing and directing it to these end users in a way, and they're the ones that can spend that time, because it's their primary job is scouting and going and looking at art in other places, and getting on those planes and traveling to those art fairs and shooting notes back to the clients that they work for. And the best ones, I think, are ones that really understand what the collectors are interested in, what they're attracted to, what they're drawn to, how they can build a collection for them that feels like it's a reflection of their personalities, and not just sort of a cookie cutter thing that's, these are all the flavor of the month. And because these trends kind of appear very rapidly, and everybody will follow them. And so the curators for sure, but also the art consultants that can like take one step back from that, kind of see it for what it is, and kind of redirect in another direction, I think are the ones that I really respect, and especially ones that are not just forcing their own taste on a client, but picking things that they know, that they've heard their clients say that they're interested in. And it could be like, I just like abstract work, or I like the color blue, or I am a real hardcore feminist and I only want to collect female artists. Like, picking out character traits that then can help shape a collecting direction, I think ends up making much more interesting collections, because they're focused and they kind of they hold together. And so I really like it when I see a collector kind of
going beyond like I know what I like and
Yeah.
kind of really saying I like this, and following that.
Yeah, I mean that's a big tall task for sure. And we keep mentioning the fairs. I've been down to Basel, of course, multiple years. We've gone. I don't know how many years ago, but we've seen it change, and we've seen how the interest has changed, and where it was currently 2 years ago. And that has completely changed, from the beginning of where it was just of smaller, really kind of enthusiasts as well as collectors, but now it's just like a general public sort of angle. Do you think they're still going to continue with that? I mean, that's a juggernaut of a fair, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the cool thing about a gigantic art fair like Art Basel Miami is that a serious collector or a museum curator, for that matter, can go there and see so much work under one roof.
Yeah.
And which otherwise would take a really long time to go hit all of New York, and then goes do London, and then do Madrid or whatever, and have all of those people in the one building and see a wide range of art. I mean, it's still a bit superficial because you're kind of getting a sampling of all of the works that those galleries from all over the world show during the course of a year or a couple of years. So you kind of have to come to terms with that, and the display of it is often not as exciting as it would be in the gallery when the artist is there kind of making that environment for you. Mm-hmm. But the value of that and also being able to make those personal connections with people, again, like all under that same roof where that's the main purpose, there's something really, really valuable about that. But I think the great thing then is that the general public can also then come in and kind of get a sense of what this crazy world of the art world looks like. Yeah. And I mean, I think that there's probably still work to be done where the galleries are probably not as generous in their time in dealing with someone that doesn't know a lot about art,
Yeah.
And so it's not as that's where like a museum, their goal is education, so they can be more generous and patient and lend a hand in helping people understand things. Whereas at one of those fairs, it can be a little ruthless.
Absolutely, and you could see, and I mean, granted, they're there for hours on end for each day, and of course if they judge that you're not really someone who's going to buy, they're just going to not really take the time to educate and the patience. So that
it's all about making the sales.
It's all about making the sale. Definitely.
But I think it's still really it's a really great phenomenon. And of course now with COVID and crowds, we'll see kind of how long it takes to kind of get back to that kind of capacity. But I think it serves a real purpose.
Nice. Yeah. And what do you do? Where do you travel to on your own personal time and when you're not hunting? I know. Obviously you need to take refuge for yourself too. So what are some of those things?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's still like a new world for me because like I like art kind of personally as well as professionally, and so often it was like really hard to know, like, is this a work trip or is this a pleasure trip, and I suppose I'm still kind of in that space where I would like to travel to a city like Venice or Paris or New York or Mexico City and I would go to art galleries and museums as well as restaurants and cool like bars or whatever, and go visit artists, So I think those are the kind of places that I still really gravitate to. Because
it's all encompassing, right? Like it's constant. You're constantly on. And some people always ask me, like, are you get tired when you're constantly on? It's like, I'm not really on. Like I enjoy design. I enjoy these conversations. I enjoy art. Like it's just something that consumes you, right? And you can just, and gratefully, fortunate enoughly, you're working in that space, in that capacity where you can just be yourself 24/7.
Yeah. And even if it's technically like a real vacation or something, I'm passively consuming this stuff, it's still going to be useful to me professionally at some
right,
point.
Exactly.
Like I saw this thing when I was on vacation. And, I'm dying to get back to Mexico City. I'm dying to get back to Tokyo.
Yeah.
I was, getting to Paris pretty regularly when I was working on this the Virgil Abloh show and going to like fashion shows in Paris. That was like pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So there's some of those kinds of cities that I really miss and I'm just itching to get back to. So
yeah, definitely. And what do you say to like the younger generation trying to get into things of art and just in general, like because it takes a lot of hard work, right? And you've been at it for so long, and it's inspiring, but I think a lot of people only do see the art on the wall. They don't see the long nights and everything that goes into it. So I how has that, like, any words on that?
I mean, one of the best pieces of advice that I got really, really early on at when I was first doing an internship at my hometown art museum was just look and look and look and look and look and look and see as much as you possibly can, because like as you're logging that visual information, you're starting to shape your sensibility and kind of to know what is effective and really resonates and what doesn't, and start to kind of create that internal criteria almost that you follow, because you end up seeing so much stuff, you kind of have to kind of like say, oh, I see that, no good, on to the next thing. And so like building those muscles of kind of discernment, I think is important, and then that then leads to the other thing that I always tell young curators that I'm meeting with is sort of developing a voice, a curatorial voice, which is about like having a position on things that you believe in and that you stand behind. And so I think that's something too that's not so easy, and it just takes time. It takes getting in front of public to talk about it. It takes writing criticism. It takes making exhibitions and getting feedback. So it's like all those ways that you put your own personal voice out on display for, which can be very vulnerable too, and
Absolutely.
sort of that's where I think you see the difference between someone that's going to make a difference and can really kind of have a career, and someone that's maybe going to kind of not kind of make that last step, because let's face it, there are only a handful of curator jobs in any city in this country, and in some cities there might only be one contemporary art curator in that one museum, so it is really a cutthroat business. I mean, cutthroat sounds like it's nasty. It's not nasty, but it's just so competitive. There's just so few jobs.
And do you think the not only the curator for the museums, but the consultants, do you think that's an avenue that will a lot? I guess what I'm asking is not necessarily young, but novice type of curators. Do any investors or collectors are open to? I guess what pedigree or where do you have to hit as a curator in order for investors to really take you seriously?
Yeah, I mean, I think once you're a curator at a museum, oftentimes then you develop relationships with the trustees of those museums, and they tend to be collectors, and so that kind of sharing of information and expertise between curators and trustees is I always found a very fun one, and it's really kind of a benefit of being a trustee at a museum, is that you get that access to those curators and what they're seeing, and like, hey, I'm thinking about buying this piece, what do you think of it? Like, getting that kind of advice is a benefit of that relationship. I think that there's a real space for younger art advisors to be out there, and especially scouting smaller galleries, upstart galleries that are showing really exciting younger artists, because that's really hard work to go and find those places and keep up with what they're doing. But I do feel like that there's still probably a hurdle in getting a collector to then believe in that younger person. I think unfortunately the way that you would do that is really like pick young artists, buy them at a low price, and then see their prices go up, and then have this track record of picking winners, so to speak. Like you're picking stocks. Unfortunately, I think that's the currency that a young art advisor would kind of have to get a collector's attention. And in some ways that's kind of a more crass part of the art where museum people kind of like to keep their distance from that because it starts to feel speculative. It can feel extractive of artists. It can feel exploitative of what they're doing, to have money be the primary focus of why the collectors are buying what they're buying and to like reap a profit, especially when, as we mentioned, the artist is not going to get to see any of that price appreciation until they start selling their works at a higher price, I suppose. But so there's something about that's still a little bit icky,
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
So.
Yeah, and I guess on the flip side of that, 2021, 2022, the near future, I guess, what are some different museums or artists that we should be looking out for, kind of those trends that you mentioned? Not really the trends, but anything that you're interested in seeing where it develops in the next year or two?
I mean, I think the thing that museums are still really reckoning with, and more, especially after what happened in 2020, with kind of the social reckoning in this country and thinking about racism and white supremacy is continuing to integrate their collections with other voices and artists that have been underrepresented. And so there's, on the one hand, historical artists that have just been overlooked and aren't part of the mainstream dialogue. I mean, those artists need to get brought up and brought back into the light and be looked at in a new way. But then I think there are also other younger artists too that are coming up, artists of color, artists from non-traditional art center, like not LA, not New York, like other cities, and having a voice. So I think that there's a loosening of that prejudice against, geographic prejudice. I mean, Chicago has really become a place where curators and collectors are looking at talent here because we have so many great art schools. It's a relatively affordable place to live. So there's a really incredible art scene here in Chicago that is being recognized, more globally now than it ever had been in the past, I think.
Interesting.
So I think that there's a willingness to look, at Detroit or at Atlanta or other places for artists and those art scenes that I think is refreshing and really necessary, as opposed to you have to be in New York in order to have a career. I mean, I think that's starting to go away, and it's so hard to make a living as an artist in those cities. You have to have a day job if you're emerging, and so when do you have time to really do that work? So it's I think that's a trend that I'm excited to see. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, it's a struggle, and for all the artists out there listening or watching, please keep up the good work for sure. Although some people get discouraged because it's like a drop in a bucket, but I mean, evolving as an artist and allowing yourself to evolve, I think is super important. Well, great. Where can people follow Museum Exchange or yourself, or where can people reach out to you if you're comfortable with that, of course?
Yeah, I mean, right now it's interesting. The Museum Exchange website and the platform is really just designed for two audiences. It's like the museum folks that log on and they get to look at all the artwork that's on there, and then the collectors that are donating. So there's not much of a spectator sport for people. I mean, if you log on to the site, which is museumexchange.com, you get a sense of kind of how the process works and that kind of thing. I would say I wish I could kind of plug my my Instagram right now or something, but my Instagram activity is so tied to like traveling and going to like concerts, both of which are like non-existent these days and stuff. So I've got to figure out a new way to push out some some ideas and some content out there. But
no problem. I was just curious.
So that's still something I need to develop a little bit more.
Great.
But that is MW Darling,
MW Darling, gotcha.
Is my Instagram handle. So
there you go. Cool. Well, yeah, thank you, Michael. I appreciate coming on. Any last words or anything like that?
No, just, it's great to be here with you, and thanks for all the great questions, and also thanks to Hayworth for this beautiful environment. And it's kind of, I am a furniture geek, at heart, so kind of looking around, seeing all this amazing stuff is very tantalizing to me. So.
Nice. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it, man.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you.
Thanks, Felix.
Okay, thank you everybody for checking out the podcast with Michael Darling. We wanted to take a second to invite their Hayworth rep who are hosting us for this episode to tell us a little bit more about the products in scene. So if you want to introduce yourself.
Awesome. Thanks, Felix. I am Lauren Freeling-Korb. I'm with Hayworth, and my title is Social Spaces Specialist.
Nice.
I've been with the company for almost 5 years now.
Cool.
So, yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, thank you for hosting us.
Absolutely.
Tell us about what we're sitting in.
Yeah, so this is actually my favorite Hayworth collection piece. So it's ironic this is the pieces we're sitting in.
Is that why you have the same color on?
Yeah, I know. That I think is just unfortunate for today, but whatever. So we are sitting in the Archibald. It is a Hayworth collection piece, as I mentioned, and it is by Poltrona Frau. What I love about this piece is it is Pelle Frau leather, and it is made to really make you feel hugged when you're seating. Wow. When you are sitting in it, along with when you have your hands on the side of the chair, on the arms, it forces you to really feel the seams and really feel the beautiful texture of the leather. So all of the stitching is hand done, and it's just a beautiful piece. I love the gunmetal detail of the legs, and so that's what we're sitting in.
Very cool. Very cool. A little bit about the tables too?
Yeah, absolutely. So those are Casina. Again, another Hayworth collection piece and part of our portfolio, and they're called Table 9. You are going to see these in a ton of different lobbies, especially in Chicago. These are specified a lot. Really popular. They come in a lot of different shapes and sizes, heights, and dimensions, and again, a really beautiful line, part of Casina.
Very cool. Very cool. Thank you. Mm-hmm. And then the rugs?
Yes,
the throw rugs?
Absolutely. So the rugs that are in this shot right now are designed by Gone. And what I love about these runners is that they're hand embroidered by women in India. So there's a really cool humanitarian story behind them, because it's really built to sustain and support women in India, because they are the only ones that can do this type of embroidery. Nice. So all of the runners you will see a part of our line are done by them.
Very cool.
Yeah.
It sounds like you guys have a lot of partnerships. Do you want to speak a little bit about that?
We do, yes. Yeah, thanks for teeing that up. Yeah. So Hayworth is a major manufacturer. We are headquartered out of Holland, Michigan, and we're predominantly known for our corporate interiors. So workstations, task seating. But I would say within the past 5 to 7 years, we've really kind of expanded upon our different brands and lines and focusing more on the hospitality residential world. So you think of the Hayworth collection brands that I just mentioned. We've have a ton of amazing partnerships, and we've acquired quite a few companies throughout the past years. So Poltrona Frau, Casina, Cappellini, Gone, as I mentioned. We have an amazing partnership with Buzzy Space, Janus AC, Quadrat. Wow. So some really incredible brands that have helped us just expand in some of these different marketplaces that before we really didn't have a reach to.
Yeah, nice.
So, yeah.
Very cool. I know this is pretty vibrant in the shots, but yes. I know you guys don't sell these, but can you speak on these?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have some incredible partners within the design community, and Patricia Urquiola has had a heavy influence on a lot of our furniture design, but also within our textiles. So she actually designed this textile and wall, I guess you'd call it an art, and really put the upholstery into the wall system. It does help a little bit even with acoustics, and it makes a beautiful design. So it does run along almost all of this side of the entire showroom.
Yeah.
So
very cool.
Yeah.
I know in our little secondary camera down here, the little James Bond one, you can get some of the product over there. Can you speak on that?
Yes, absolutely. So the one in the far corner, that's kind of a solo chair, that is another Poltrona Frau piece. It's called the Ginger Chair. What I love about it is it has lots of different options, again, for a Pelle Frau leather, but you can make it a two-toned option. So the one that you're going to see in the shot does have that two-tone. So a lighter color in the interior or exterior, and then vice versa.
Gotcha.
Again, that hand stitching is really visible, and I just think it's a beautiful piece that we have in our line.
Nice.
And then the other chair you'll see, the dark brown with the dark brown frame, that is a classic piece that we have in our portfolio. It is by Cassina. It is an LC chair, and again, that's one of our more iconic designs. When you think of some more just iconic furniture pieces, Le Corbusier has been around for years, and his design is iconic. You look at that frame, that metal frame. This is actually not as traditional as you usually see it, but that's what's kind of fun is you can mix it up and have some different finishes and colors. So
nice.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for taking the time and letting us
Absolutely.
know. And again, thank you for hosting us. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Doors closing.